Welcome to SoulBlazing. I'm Lisa Haisha. My guest today is writer, director, co-creator of 2.5 Men, former producer of Big Bang Theory, and my husband, Lori Aronsohn.
Oh.
I didn't want to kiss you because I didn't want to ruin my makeup.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to ruin my makeup either.
Right.
Before we get started, I have a bone to pick with
Okay.
you, okay? And I'm sorry to do it in public, but this is the only way. For years, you've been hearing me say whenever our daughter says she wants something, I want a doggy, I want a pony, I want an iPad, I want an iPhone, I said, yeah, I want my own talk show, okay?
Yeah.
I want my own talk show.
Yes, you've been saying that.
You
from
took
day
my
one.
talk show.
Yeah, I know.
What's up with this?
Well, there's a reason.
Where's my talk show?
Well, you gotta, kiss up to me a little more. Maybe I'll make it happen for you.
Okay.
You know?
I just had to get that off my chest.
Okay, that's good because you're holding that anger
Yes,
in. She
yes.
got her own talk show.
Yeah,
Dang.
right.
Okay.
Your turn. What are your grievances?
My grievances are, I have no grievances with you. You're like perfect.
We've got that on videotape, ladies and gentlemen.
Because we all, as our daughter says, we all have our own personality, and we should accept and be ourselves. So, yes.
Great.
Yes. So, you're on my show. What are you doing now with your life?
What am I doing now
Yes.
with my life? You don't know? Okay.
I know you're doing a documentary.
All right.
Yes, tell me
well,
about that.
all right. You've got to start with why I'm not doing television anymore.
Okay. So, Lee, why aren't you doing television anymore?
Good question, Lisa. I made my living in sitcoms for very many years. I started in 1977 on The Love Boat, and I've worked on dozens of shows, and got very lucky at the end with two very, very successful shows, Big Bang Theory and 2.5 Men. I co-created 2.5 Men, and I helped run the show on Big Bang Theory. I didn't co-create Big Bang Theory. A lot of people get that wrong. But the thing is that after doing the same thing, basically the same job on many different shows, over a period of very many years, it's all glamorous and exciting at the beginning, but after a couple of decades, it's a job. And like any other job, it really stopped being fun for me after a while. And when you get to the point where you've got all the material things that you really reasonably need, then you have to start thinking about, well, what do I want to do? And I got to the point where it just seemed like a good time to step away from television. And then the question became, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Because I didn't think to myself, I want to leave sitcoms and go do X or Y or Z. I stepped away because I thought to myself, I'm not having fun doing what I'm doing anymore. I don't have to do it anymore. So maybe I can create the space in my life for something else to be important to me, if I put this aside. Because a lot of times, you can't find something new in your life unless you make the space for it. If you're walking along the road and you're carrying this big box of rocks and you see a gold coin on the sidewalk, you can't pick up the gold coin until you put down the box of rocks. And for me, sitcoms was the box of rocks, So I did that, and as you know, for about a year, I was kind of, what am I going to do now? And I don't know what I'm going to do. And an idea presented itself to me, and it was, the genesis of it was 40 years old. When I was in college in the early 1970s, I attended the University of Colorado at Boulder. And it was a real hippie town in those days. And there was a bunch of guys who were musicians who lived up in the mountains. I mean, real honest to God hippies, lived in school buses and cabins and teepees and stuff. And they would come down to campus and they would play music on the lawn. They called themselves Magic Music. They played acoustic instruments. They had a flute, they had a mandolin, they had some guitars, and they sang beautiful harmonies, and they had original songs, and I just loved them, you know, from the first time I heard them. And I would go hear them all over Boulder, wherever they would play for a couple of years, and then they disappeared. And I never heard anything about them again. I graduated in 1975 and lived my life, you know, moved to Los Angeles, did everything, you know, that people do growing up. But for all those years, I still remembered the songs. There was never any album, there was never any record. They really left almost no trace of their existence. But the songs stayed in my head. And, you know, when Ava was a little baby, one of the songs I would sing to her, actually, just from memory. And so I decided to start doing a little research, a little Google research, and I tracked down one of the members, former members of the band. And I decided, this is a story that nobody else is going to tell, because nobody else has heard of this band unless they were in Boulder in the early 70s. Yeah. I have the time, I have the resources, I have the love of the music. I decided to make a documentary, and for the last almost 3 years now, I've been working on that and recently finished it. And we premiered at the Woodstock Film Festival a couple of weeks ago, and in a couple of weeks from now, we're going to be at the Napa Valley Film Festival. And in February, we're going to be at the Boulder International Film Festival. And we're talking to distributors, and, you know, hopefully it will have a life. I didn't do it to make money. I didn't do it to advance any career. I don't know that I would ever want to do another documentary, but I feel great that I put myself into something that meant something to me, you know, that was important, and saw it through and told a story that hasn't been told, and resurrected some music that hasn't been heard in over 40 years. It turns out the band had these tracks, these demo tracks, that they had recorded back in the early 70s that had never been released, never been made in a record. Nobody had heard them except the band. And they sounded great. And so I scored the entire documentary with these vintage tracks. And I'm very proud of it.
That's wonderful. So what you're doing now is, once you know, when you're younger, you want to go to college, you want to make money, you never wanted to be a writer.
No, God, no.
You want to tell that story about?
Okay. When I came to Los Angeles, I didn't have any clear-cut career plans, but I knew I wanted to be in show business, and I kind of wanted to be a performer, because I'm a class clown that wanted to go pro. You know, I loved being the center of attention, and you know, the dream of Hollywood is if you get fame and you get money and everything, then everybody's going to like you and you're going to feel good about yourself. You know, that doesn't turn out to be the case. You know, I made a lot of money fairly young, which just made me feel worse.
It made you feel worse because you weren't in a good place.
Yeah, it made me feel worse because if you don't think you're worthy, you know,
Yes.
if you have a low self-esteem and people are rewarding you anyway, you know, then you start thinking there's something really wrong with the universe here. Because the adulation or validation or anything doesn't fill you up. It makes you think, okay, I'm fooling everybody, and then you start thinking, okay, eventually they're going to find out, and then that's going to be really, it just is not good. Everybody says money does not buy happiness, and nobody believes it until they get money.
Yes,
But
very true.
it's absolutely the truth.
Money buys freedom.
Money buys freedom, but I'll tell you something, if you have your health, if you have a roof over your head, if you have clothes on your back, you know, food on the table, you know, if your basic needs are taken care of and you're not, you know, worrying about survival, if you can't find any happiness or satisfaction in your life now, you're not going to be able to, no matter what you get tomorrow.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
And I've lived that, you know.
Many people have. So many people that I've talked to that are millionaires or billionaires all say the same thing. And if you're unhappy, the money makes you more unhappy. And that's when you commit suicide or get into drugs or start leading a debaucherous life.
If you can wake up every morning
Yes.
and think, gee, you know, maybe today's the day I hit the lottery. Maybe today's the day I'll sell my screenplay. If you can wake up every day with that hope, You know, no matter how miserable you are, at least you have that hope that tomorrow's going to be different, tomorrow's going to be better. But once you've sold the screenplay, once you've hit the lottery, you know, once you've gotten those things that you were sure were going to change everything, then you wake up every day and there's no more hope left. You know, you can't say to yourself, gee, if I just get that job, I'll be happy. Gee, if I just get that car, I'll be happy. You know, you've got the job, you've got the car, you've got the money in the bank. You know, you've got, if it's women you want, there's women. And that's really, really depressing.
And it's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Yes.
You know, I developed a serious drug problem back in the day because of it. And I've been sober for 34 years, so. But certainly it was success that almost killed me.
But what did you enjoy about working in television? There had to be some reward.
Well, there's monetary rewards.
Besides money, there had to be.
The part of the process is you get to work with great people, you know.
Get to meet amazing people.
You get to meet
across the board.
amazing people. You get to laugh a lot if you work in comedy. You get the satisfaction of seeing something go from your brain onto a sheet of paper, into an actor's mouth, and then out of a television screen for, you know, millions of people. And that's a kick, certainly at the beginning. I remember the first time I ever walked on a movie set where they were shooting something I wrote was The Love Boat. It was at 20th Century Fox, and you know, they were shooting this, thank you.
The one person who saw it, yeah.
Captain Stubing, thanks you. They were shooting this big party scene, you know, and everybody was dressed up and it was all glamorous and the lights were there, and the people were saying words that I had made up, you know, and it was just the most thrilling thing, you know, and you never really get over it, but it does lessen over the years. They say the most exciting day of your life is your first day on a Hollywood set. And the most boring day of your life is every day after that,
Yes.
you know? And that's pretty much true.
Yeah, yeah.
But over the years, yeah, there've been wonderful times, and I've enjoyed a lot of it. But again, if you do one thing over and over again long enough, at least for me, it's like, I'm getting older, there's so many things I haven't done. You know, let's try some things I haven't been doing for 30 years.
Yeah, so your whole life since we've been together at least, you've been working a lot, and now you want to take time off. Now I'm working a lot.
Yeah,
so
well.
So you get to go take the vacations.
Thanks, God, you know.
Yeah, so what do you plan on doing the next 5 years, 10 years?
Boy, if I had a plan, it would be the first time in my life I've ever had a plan.
Okay, so that's interesting, because a lot of people think that you do have to create a plan, a 1 year, 6 month, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year. And have goals set for each day. You never did that.
You know, it's like John Lennon says, you know, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. There's nothing in my life, I can't think of anything that's happened in my life that I ever planned for. And so much of what's happened in my life has been so much better than anything I could have ever planned for. So, you know, plans have never been big for me. I mean, obviously on a day-to-day basis, you got to plan to take care of what needs to be taken care of. But in terms of goals, no, because I think I'm a firm believer in the Zen philosophy that, you know, you can go down to the river and you can curse which way the river is flowing, or you can applaud which way the river is flowing, but the river's just going to keep flowing. So you might as well jump in and go with the flow.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that if you show up for life, you know, put one foot in front of the other every day, you're going to end up where you're supposed to be. But it's not necessarily someplace you could ever envision being. You know, I never could have envisioned being a writer. I guess I kind of got sidetracked from telling you that story. Okay, so I came to LA because I wanted to be a performer, the center of attention. And I started doing stand-up, like at the Comedy Store and the Improv and stuff like that. But I also needed a job because you couldn't make a living as a stand-up comic, especially in those days. Guys that were unknown and trying to break through, when I was doing it, when I started doing it, were like David Letterman and Jay Leno and Robin. I used to have to follow Robin Williams at the Comedy Store at Westwood. So
That
these
was
guys,
tough.
you know, these guys weren't making it
Yeah.
yet. You know, it was going to be a long time before I was going to. So I needed a job. And like many people who come to Los Angeles, I came with a list of family, friends, and acquaintances that had some connection to show business. And one of the guys was a guy named Ben Jolson, whose brother did my father's car insurance in New York. And he was a television writer. And he and his partner had just gotten a job working on a new show called The Love Boat. And Ben was great. He agreed to have lunch with me, and he came to see me do my stand-up. And afterwards he said to me, you know, you're funny. Have you ever considered writing? And I said, no, I hate writing. You know, it's like having a term paper every day of your life. I can't think of anything worse. And then he told me what they were paying writers on The Love Boat. I said, you know, on the other hand,
I love writing. Here's a story right now.
I never said I loved writing, but I was certainly willing to consider it. And God bless Ben, you know, he encouraged me. He sent me scripts. He said, you know, try and come up with some stories, which I did. And, you know, over a period, pitched him stories and eventually came up with one he thought was good enough to bring to the producers. He said, let's see if you can write a scene. And I didn't have a typewriter. I had a legal pad, you know, and I just wrote in longhand, but using the form that I'd seen in the scripts. I wrote a Love Boat scene, and I brought it to his house, and he just looked at it, he read it, he said, yeah, you can write. And so the next thing I know, I'm, you know, having a story meeting at 20th Century Fox.
And you never studied writing, right?
Never studied writing.
Okay.
Never studied writing. I don't think I did a legitimate term paper in my life. I copied from the encyclopedia, or, you know, no, writing was never on my radar. But it turned out that because I had spent so much of my life vegging in front of the television set, by osmosis, I got a knack of how TV sounds.
The rhythm.
The rhythms, you know, dialogue. I was able to recreate that. And I thought anybody could do it. Apparently, not a lot of people can, because they gave me one assignment on Love Boat, which I wrote, and then they gave me another one, and I wrote it, and then they gave me a third one, which involved the character of the captain's bastard daughter, Vicky. So I created that character, and then they hired me on staff. You know, so all of a sudden I'm going from a broke would-be stand-up comic who's living on, I would go to Safeway and buy a 10-pound bag of potatoes for 69 cents and just live on baked potatoes all week. That's how broke I was. To I got an office in a little bungalow on 20th Century Fox, and I got a pile of cocaine on the glass ashtray next to my typewriter. You know, Robin Williams said, cocaine is God's way of saying you're making too much money. And, you know, he was right. Yeah. So yeah, I became a writer totally by accident. Even, you know, for a long time after I was making a living as a writer, if people asked me, what do you do? I would say I'm a stand-up comic. You know, even though I was making nothing as a comic, but that's how I identified.
What was your success as a comic? I mean,
What
did
was
you have
none?
any?
None.
Did you have fans or?
No. I was doing, you know, I was just doing late night sets, you know, at clubs or showcases.
People were booing? Boo!
No, nobody was. Well, nobody was booing, but I had bad nights. I had good nights and bad nights. I opened the one paying gig I got.
Tell me a joke.
Tell you what?
Yeah.
Didn't tell jokes.
Tell
The only jokes I could tell you were jokes from other comics, but I did open for John Lee Hooker, who's an old blues guy, because I knew his manager. His manager actually sold me cocaine. Okay. And so she got me this gig opening for John Lee Hooker in Victoria, British Columbia, in Canada. So I go up there, and the thing I didn't realize at the time is everybody in Canada with an actual sense of humor has already moved to the United States. So everybody that's left really has very little sense of humor. And especially the people that were coming to that blues club to see John Lee Hooker that night. So I did 2 nights there, and the first night was horrible. And so the second night, I said to myself, I don't give a damn, I'll say anything. And I started riffing on Margaret Trudeau, who was the first lady of Canada. And somehow they loved that, they ate it up, yay, you know? And that was my big triumph. And that's basically my professional stand-up comedy career.
Wow, okay.
I did a little audience warm-up, you know,
Okay.
whenever you
For
know,
TV shows?
Yeah, for like
For 2.5?
For 2.5, you know, when Mark Sweet wasn't available, the guy who did our warm-up, you know, because I had this one little bit that I used to do.
Want to share some of that?
Really?
It's my show. My show. My show. You do as I say.
Okay, I'm going to stand up. Can you deal with that? If I stand up?
Yes.
All right. So, all right. This is something I did 40 years ago, all right? But I talked about how I grew up as a child of television. I really was part of the first television generation. I was born in 1952. And yeah, television was basically my mother and my father, and it was really hard getting nourishment trying to suck a horizontal hold knob, you know? But one of my favorite shows growing up was the original Superman show. Do you remember that with George Reeves? Yeah? I loved that show. I loved the way the opening of it was so dramatic. You know, he goes, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. And then this guy goes, look, up in the sky, it's a bird. He thinks it's a bird? I wonder about this guy. I wonder about anybody that is that fascinated with the mundane that he would go, look, up in the sky, it's a bird. Imagine living with this guy. You'd be walking down the street, right? All of a sudden, look, down on the sidewalk, it's a gum wrapper. Wonder if this guy was married. His honeymoon must have been a panic, right? Look, 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 all night long.
I have to say, you're probably one of the most boring guests I've had.
So I'm available for weddings and bar mitzvahs.
Oh, thank you very much for coming on my show.
That's it?
I really
You're done
appreciate
with me?
it. Everybody, Lee Aronsohn.